We live in an era of digital vetting. Before a first date, we instinctively cross-reference Instagram feeds, LinkedIn profiles and Google results just to make sure our romantic prospect is a real person. But internet stalking only tells us so much. If we truly want to protect our hearts, maybe we need to treat the dating market like the job market. Over the years, I've employed a fair number of people, and I've made my share of poor choices. No system's fail-safe. But I've tried to stack the odds through running a thorough selection process by picking up references by phone. Writing actual letters of reference for former employees is about as prevalent these days as snail mail. In the social era and AI, they just don't cut it. In any case, they started to become a risk when new employers took to litigation if they felt you overrepresented the person's capabilities. There was also the very real possibility that the departing employee could take to their socials to diss you or leave a devastating review on Glassdoor if you didn't give them quite the rave they felt was their due. The magnificent result was the statement of employment, the bare minimum legal requirement any employer is required to provide. This nothing burger literally confirms the job title and time served, and it possibly includes an invitation to call for more information. It was a compromise that served no one. In the employment context, seeking and providing character references is a big part of the deal and acceptable on both sides of the negotiation. For candidates, protection lies in the fact that it's up to them whose name they give as referees, and you'd hope they'd pick fans. But even the most enthusiastic fan can't always defend their idol across the spectrum of topics that might come up. I've become good at reading, or accurately listening between the lines. It's easy to hear the slight hesitations before the referee answers a difficult question, and to spot the careful phrasing to avoid being untruthful when there is actually cause for concern. But frankly, I've been amazed at times what referees have been prepared to tell me about the candidate. One was in the middle of a vitriolic personal grievance claim against the company. The last reference check I gave had its challenges. It was for someone I mostly rated highly and liked a lot, but aspects of their attitude and approach were quite tricky to manage. When asked, I gave a measured response that made it clear I had reservations in this one area, but then I stressed I didn't think it would prevent them from succeeding in the intended role. You don't want to limit the prospects of someone you broadly feel is a good thing, but the issues had caused a few problems in my business, and I don't think it's fair to a potential new boss to gloss over stuff like that, and I'd hope they wouldn't do it to me. I take the approach of raving in a good way where I can and keep the negatives short and as sweet as I honestly can make them. Consider how differently we would view the dating game if people took up reference checks from one or more former partners before they ever agreed to a date. What would your exes say about you? More to the point, what, if asked, would you say about them? Here's an example that I've just made up based on an amalgam of my own experience. To whom it may concern, Re Barlow Brinksman. Barlow and I cohabited for nearly a decade, during which time he held the role of my life partner. This was a position for which he ultimately proved unfit, as he failed to meet his key performance indicators, and the partnership dissolved. Despite his excellent onboarding qualifications, alpha male status, a C-suite tech role, a large asset base, a gym-honed physique, and an impressive intellect, he somehow never entirely fulfilled his potential. Barlow is just not a team player. He's hyper-competitive, struggles with collaborative sharing, and prioritises his own schedule over the partnership. I can't fault his commitment to the more physical deliverables of the role, where he demonstrated an enthusiastic, somewhat obsessive approach. I also cannot complain about his earning power, though his financial model was completely siloed. What was his remained his. Barlow was always punctual and could mask his flaws with high sociability when it suited him. He communicates exceptionally well on a surface level. I never had any difficulty understanding his basic needs, but he has a total lack of emotional bandwidth and refuses to engage in deep conversations. While he carried out complex duties with competence, he completely checked out of the relationship whenever major sporting events conflicted with mutual weekend plans. He is entirely capable of working without supervision, but exhibits zero initiative during crucial annual milestones like birthdays and holidays. Furthermore, his alpha male mindset frequently manifested as toxic leadership, and he became incredibly resistant to feedback if he didn't get his way. In my opinion, despite his fine attributes, he has hopped between too many relationships throughout his career and is a major flight risk for any permanent life partnership position. Moreover, his exit strategy was highly unprofessional, leaving the relationship abruptly without serving out an acceptable notice period or offering closure. For him to succeed in a demanding long-term role, it would take a massive psychological shift to embrace modern relationship core values: active listening, emotional labour, vulnerability, and compromise. While I could recommend him for a casual short-term contract, or perhaps as a transitional rebrand-bound person, I would heavily advise you to swipe left if you were looking for a long-term investment. Personally, I would not rehire him if hell froze over. But please don't hesitate to reach out if you require further data. Yours faithfully, etc. If the above were a letter of reference for a potential employee, it would likely be severely career limiting. But what if it were from a previous partner of a person that you've already started to fall for? Realistically, the concept of romantic reference checks doesn't have legs. Entertaining though I find it, and I do, I doubt it would make people behave any differently during relationships, and going back to previous partners for a reference would likely just dredge up any residual biases or bitterness, which tend to distort the good things. It's true some couples manage to maintain close ties after their romantic relationship is toast, and perhaps those types would be good referees. Perhaps not. If you're the person who left, generally it's because your partner has some behaviours or values that you don't share or find difficult, and providing a candid reference would bring these out. If you've been unceremoniously dumped, your feelings towards that person are likely to be skewed negative. In any case, a person that's a disaster for me could be the one for you. And there are always two sides to any story. What I perceive to be the truth, or perhaps my truth, can be very different to what an ex sees. But it's entirely subjective, and a reference from me would likely be meaningless. So I'd pick that most people wouldn't bother to take up emotional references or pay attention to them if they did. After all, what would their last partner know? Once you start to get romantically involved, common sense, discernment and logic exit stage left with the speed of a bobsled on a downhill run where the driver and brakeman have lost control. You might even say they'd broken up. Few of us have no skeletons in our closets. Mostly they're minor, the sort that you'd fess up to once a degree of intimacy has been built, not in a fact-checking exercise before you've begun. For the would-be dater, the internet and social media already provide extensive opportunities to stalk people for insight into who they are. But what does it really tell us? No one advertises their worst traits on a public profile. As a species, we take enormous risks with our hearts, playing fast and loose with our emotional capital. We can use every vetting tool in the book, but sometimes you don't know you've made a disastrous hire until they're already sitting in the corner office wrecking the company culture.